So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Lawson. Welcome to the webinar, which is about resilience and how we might go about getting the resilience habit. A little bit about me. I was a social worker and then a trainer and a commissioner, and for the last 10 years I've been independent, doing a whole range of types of work, but I've always over that time had a really passionate interest in notions and concepts of resilience in social work, and have done quite a lot of work at the much more kind of challenging end of resilience, where we've had particularly maybe traumatic things happening to individuals, groups or teams. So I've done quite a lot of debriefing and quite a lot of training around emotional resilience, and so I also do quite a lot of training on resilience generally, and emotional resilience and recovery from trauma particularly. So I can say a little bit more about that if we need to, but I think probably the best thing is just to get into some of the content. So what I've done is really just tried to give you a taster of the things that the participants that come to the programs that I run find helpful. And it's an offer of a range of things, and obviously not everybody takes everything away with them. So you know, just listen out for maybe the 1, 2 or 3 things that you think are kind of relevant to you. And this is my first ever webinar, so I'm a bit nervous, but we're in and on. So let's just think about some of the areas that we're going to cover. I want to take you through some definitions, a lay definition of resilience, and what the key characteristics of resilient people are, why it's important. Think about what in our work challenges us to, in terms of resilience, and the habits that we often have at work that don't help us to be as resilient as we might be. And then think about the kind of 4 key habits, so 4 key areas in which you can think about developing resilience, and within those 4 key areas just some very practical hints and tips about where you might make a start. And what I've done is just, as we've gone through the presentations, just put some questions for you to think about, just to kind of maybe trigger your thinking as we, yes, I'll
You are now unmuted.
Right. I'll have a go at just closing the blind, because that's a bit blinding for people. So just give me a minute and then we'll get on. How's that? That looks a bit better from my end. I hope that's better for you. No problems. Okay, so my intention on this Friday lunchtime is just to challenge you a little bit, because I think thinking about resilience in this kind of way is a challenge to the pressures and habits that we build up to respond to the demands of social work. So just give you a little chance to kind of reflect on that. Ideas I've already talked to you about. So, you know, it just gives you a chance to think about some things for the weekend, and maybe just encourage you to try something different on Monday. So, what is resilience? I'm going to talk a little bit in this session and about Diane Kutu's work for the Harvard Business Review. At the end of the PowerPoint, there are some key texts that you can kind of refer to. So I've referred to some of them. The others are at the end of the presentation, things that I think are particularly helpful. So Diane really took an overview of the literature, and it's a very simple, straightforward article, really, and it has some very powerful things, I think, to say to us. So she defines resilience as the skills and capacity to continue to function and perform under conditions of enormous stress, pressure, or change, or any combination of these. So it's what keeps us going when things are difficult.
You are now unmuted.
Diane identifies from the literature 3 key characteristics of resilient people which come through, she says, all of the research that she's looked at. So, and she also said, sorry, I seem to be having a problem about being randomly muted. So it is telling me, but this may feel a bit broken up. So I don't quite know why that is. Anyway, the 3 kind of key characteristics which she says must be present. It's not good enough to have 2. We must have all 3 of these. So first of all, as resilient people, we have a realistic perspective on life and work. So that means neither too pessimistic or too optimistic, but a kind of balanced view about our capacities and capabilities, and also about the reality of life, that, you know, it's not straightforward. Difficult things, you know, happen in our personal lives and happen at work, and we can accept that that happens, and we're going to have to deal with them. Secondly, people have a meaning and purpose which motivates them at work and in the rest of their lives. So there's some passion or commitment or engagement which gives us meaning and helps us kind of get up in the morning and be motivated to do what we do in our lives. And the third thing is that we can be flexible and adaptable in our approach to life and work. So we don't have strong views about one size fits all or fixed beliefs or a need to be in control of everything. We can flex and respond to the situations that we find ourselves in. So I think in terms of social work, we can see that some of these characteristics are key for us, really. I think all of us come into social work with a kind of passion and commitment to help others, and that helps give meaning and purpose to what we do. I think the way that we are realistic about that comes over time. So often we start off our careers with a lot of idealism and energy, enthusiasm, and gradually we get a more realistic perspective. And again, I wonder sometimes about the flexible and adaptable approaches. You know, it does seem that we are very constrained by forms and processes and IT systems. So again, I don't know how you would respond to thinking about those key characteristics of resilient people and how much you feel you embody them, and what the kind of issues are for social work about that. Why is this important? Again, you may or may not be aware, but resilience seems to be a kind of flavour of the month, kind of trending topic around work. And there's a lot of research coming out at the minute about resilience and work. So I've just picked out this quote from Dean Becker, who's a resilience trainer. More than education, more than experience, more than training, a person's level of resilience will determine who succeeds and who fails. That's true in the cancer ward, it's true in the Olympics, and it's true in the workplace. So I guess, you know, the person who can kind of keep going when things get difficult is more likely to succeed than the person who gives up or tells themselves that they can't. So why is this important? Why do we need to kind of think about resilience in children's social work? So there are still kind of signs that people come into social work and actually move on and leave early, and those numbers are still too high. Those of us who stay in are at significant risk of a burnout at some stage during our careers. And so again, I work with both NQSWs and more experienced practitioners, and these are the experiences that people describe. I think one of the reasons behind that is that in the work that we do, first of all, it's far too easy to develop habits and routines and beliefs which actively undermine our ability to be resilient, and I'll say a little bit more about that in the presentation. And again, I think secondly, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as well, the work that we do requires what Barry Mason calls relational risk-taking. So it's not that we can do the work technically, we have to invest some of ourselves into it. And again, I think that makes us vulnerable in terms of the impact that the work that we do and that we witness has upon us. Excuse me, I'm just going to get a drink. So, I was talking earlier about the bad habits which undermine resilience. So, what are those kind of bad habits? How might we think about the things that we do which actually make us less resilient? I'm sure you will know in your working environments that it's really easy to be in a kind of react, respond, deliver mode the whole of the week. There are lots and lots of demands upon us. There's lots of busyness and things to do and people asking us to do things and things that we need to respond to. So I'm sure you don't need me to tell you how busy the world can be. And so we're already in a space when we're busy. And if that starts to kind of get a bit out of control, then what happens to us is that we start to become distracted and anxious and overwhelmed. So instead of just maybe feeling, yes, it's high pressure and it's high busyness, but you know, I like that and I thrive in that environment, we find ourselves responding to one email and thinking about 4 that we need to respond to and 3 others that we need to write and 6 phone calls that we need to make and all the visits that we need to do. And so instead of focusing on one task at a time and being present, what happens to us is we become distracted, anxious and overwhelmed. And if that carries on for a period of time, we end up feeling out of control, that you know, we can't have lunch breaks, we can't go to the loo, we have to work evenings and weekends, and so we start losing control of the boundaries of our work. And again, as we get more into that cycle, we'll then get exhausted. When we're exhausted, our thinking often becomes distorted, and it's very easy for us to get caught up in catastrophic thinking. So I'm not good enough, why am I doing this job? I need to keep going or something terrible will happen, all of that kind of stuff. So it's just an illustration, and I'm sure you have felt this or know people have felt this. It's very easy just to get on that treadmill and just feel it's going quicker and quicker and getting away from us. So how can we kind of begin to break the habits at work? So what I'm going to do in this section is just summarize some of the things that on the training courses we do in a little bit more detail, but also give you the references so that you can have a look at these in your own time. So what I'm getting people to think about is so how do we, if it's busy, how do we make our best use of time at work? How do we focus and preserve our energy so that we don't get too tired at work? And fundamentally for me, it's about how do we challenge the thinking and beliefs that we have about work. So I just want to go through these kind of 3 areas and then take you into 4 ideas for thinking about where we might start to kind of break the habits that we're into and develop more resilient habits. So in terms of making better use of time at work, Stephen Covey, which we'll talk a little bit more in the next slide as well, 7 habits of highly effective people. One of the habits is thinking about our decision making around doing what's urgent and what's important. And what Stephen says is that in a busy, reactive environment, what we will do is spend time on the urgent things as they come up, rather than just having some reflective time and thinking about things that are important as well as urgent. So, you know, it's not uncommon for me on training to have people saying, you know, I'm too busy to be here. You know, training is important to me, but actually there's lots and lots of things I need to do. I need to do at work, and I'm finding it hard to get out of that mindset and into the training mindset. So one of the challenges is to think about yes, it's really important that we do the urgent and important things that are key to our role and key to our responsibilities. And what I would say to you is there are lots of things that appear urgent but actually aren't important, and there are lots of things that aren't neither urgent nor important. So one of the things that I would ask you to think about in that is how much time you spend doing other people's work for them. So one of the things that social work gives us is this ability to take responsibility and to problem solve and to sort things out. So it's often easier for us to say, I may as well do that because it will be quicker, rather than let somebody else take on and step in to their responsibility for tasks. So quite often we're taking on tasks that aren't ours. In terms of urgent and not important, the things that I would ask you to think about would be meetings. How many meetings do you go to that you really need to go to? How many meetings do you go to for all of that you don't need to be at all of? How many meetings can you take control of and shorten so that they don't take as long? So just to give you a challenge to kind of think about finding some space in your day for the important things like training and supervision and keeping yourself hydrated and making sure you eat and those kinds of things, as well as the urgent stuff that we know we need to deal with. Brian Tracy has a very simple little book called Eating Frogs, and what he means about that is that we often put off the most difficult things in our diary or our day until the end of the day or the following day or next week. And what he says is that that wastes an awful lot of time and energy, and it's much better to take control of the things that we are maybe feeling a bit nervous about doing, or might not go so well, or we're just a bit concerned about, and just doing those first. And the reason he says that works for us is that often what we generate in front of difficult tasks is a lot of anticipatory anxiety. So if you think about difficult things that we do, we often worry about them more than is justified by the outcome of the event itself. This is just a kind of characteristic of human beings. So if we can take control of that, we're not going to be distracted, because these things tend to still worry us when we're not doing them. We'll experience less anxiety about them, and it gives people a lot more energy and time. So again, one of the things that quite a lot of the participants say is, we did the whole day together, but what I remember is eating frogs, and I'm finding that beneficial. So if that appeals to you, I'd encourage you to kind of give it a go. And just think about what the important things are that you can't currently find the time for, and how is that actually going to help you? So when we're thinking about the busyness, if we just take time to sort some of the things out that cause us problems, then actually that saves us time later. So part of the paradox about getting more time is that actually we have to invest some time in sorting things out. So a good example for me is I've worked with a couple of teams now who need to find the right forms to issue proceedings, or particularly issuing proceedings actually. And so I had two teams describe the fact that all of those forms aren't in the right place at the right time. You actually need some particular knowledge to find the right forms. And actually, if we just took some time to put them in a folder where everybody could find them, everybody's going to save time. But again, we're too busy, so we just waste time being ineffective, when actually if we could use some time up front, we could be much more effective over time. Some more things about focusing and preserving our energy. Again, this is Stephen Covey's work, and this habit is called self-efficacy. So I'm sure some of you will have seen this somewhere. And again, what I like about these frameworks is that they're very simple to do. They're very helpful. I use them most days to kind of think about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And self-efficacy is really about thinking about our zone of control, our zone of influence, and our and what we need to accept. So what we see from this is we'll waste energy, for example, by trying to control what we would be better off accepting because we can't change it, and trying to influence things that actually we might be better in and taking control of. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. The other thing that we find when we're busy is that we feel our zone of control shrinking. So again, if you think about that feedback loop that happens when we start getting busy and then we start getting distracted, what's happening at that point is that we're kind of losing control of our decision making, and so we feel that kind of shrinks. So again, one of the things that I think is really helpful to think about is how big is your zone of control, and it's probably bigger than you think it is, but that may take you out of your comfort zone, and it may take you into some accountability conflicts that you experience internally and externally. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we come on to that slide. So just think about what you can take control of, what you can influence, and maybe what you're giving time to, but it would be better just to accept it. So how can you expand your zone of control? How can you get more influence? What are the things that you accept, and what are the things that you shouldn't accept? So I'm not encouraging you to accept that you have to work every evening and you have to work every weekend, and that's just the way it is. That's not what I mean when I'm talking about things that we need to accept. So how can we think about preserving our energy when we know that it's busy? And one of the other things about busyness is we tend to not notice our internal states very much, and we'll do again 1 or 2 hints and tips about this. And here's the first one, really. It's just about noticing what triggers you, and just thinking about how you can get that emotional response under control quickly. And one of the easiest ways of thinking about this is email. I guess we all, certainly know I do, we receive email from particular people, and just seeing that person appear on the screen triggers a response in us. And then you see the topic, and that triggers another response. And before you've even read what the words say, you're already kind of knowing and thinking what it says. And certainly I've been in situations where I've made massive assumptions about what's in an email that actually isn't written there at all. So I think that's a good way of connecting with, actually there is no point to getting as energized as we do about things that kind of come to us in email. And if we can kind of resist some of that and get back into our comfort zone or our window of tolerance about those things, then we're going to be able to, we'll be less tired at the end of the day. So email is a good example around that, but there will be other things as well. So what is it that happens in meetings, phone calls, visits, or email communication, which triggers a reaction, and what's the environment like in your team and your environment? If somebody gets an email that triggers them, do they trigger everybody else around you, or are you kind of giving yourselves containing messages that keep yourselves focused and in control? What are your managers doing? Are they helping you with that? Just stay focused and stay calm and get through the day without wasting too much energy. So now, just moving on to maybe some of the more challenging things about our thinking and our beliefs. So we talked about that cycle of that comes from being too busy earlier. And I think this comes from some of the thinking and our beliefs. I can get it all done. So again, some of us, this is the point at which it's also helpful to think about what's going on with our self-talk. What is it that we kind of say to ourselves? And one of the challenges that I always have for NQSWs is that one of the things that you have to accept in your zone of acceptance is that there will always be more that you could do for people than you can do. So this kind of work has more tasks in it than actually you can complete. So if you're looking at getting everything done, then you're going to be disappointed, or you're going to burn out, or you're going to get fed up and leave. And again, I think if you're focusing on trying to get it all done, you're not very focused on what are the really urgent, important things I need to get done, and how do I get those done. So there is something called flocking, which means that if we get one of the things that are urgent and important done, or one of the important things done, other things get done as well. Again, I'm sure this is very common in your work sites and very common to you, but you know, people get this sense that they have to work long hours with no breaks, and there is no evidence that this is at all helpful. So two things about this. All of the kind of performance research would say that our performance deteriorates over time without a break. And so, you know, around about 40 minutes without having a break is enough to kind of keep you going. And again, what the research says is that if you're under more pressure, then you need to do smaller amounts of work and take bigger breaks and take more regular breaks. I was on a conference with a guy who was involved in real-time computer problems for Formula One Grand Prix cars on a race weekend, and he said when the pressure comes on, we work in 10-minute slots, and then we come back together. So rather than kind of, because we know our performance will go because the anxiety and the pressure is so high. So I think that's an interesting thing for you to kind of think about. I think the other thing around this is something called decision fatigue. So again, there's a well-established research basis which says the longer we go without a break, the more we just rely on habit, and we close down the information that we can take in around our decisions. So again, if we take regular breaks, then we're going to make better decisions. Again, I think just taking breaks allows us to process the information. It's very easy to end a day not just tired, but with a head full of unprocessed information that we then need to kind of go home and do. So little and often is a really important habit around resilience under pressure. And again, I think a lot of people would say that they work best under pressure, and I've referenced one of the books on pressure and the kind of neuroscience around it at the end of the presentation. And what they demonstrate very clearly is that there is no evidence that anybody works continually well under pressure. So yes, we can perform occasionally under pressure, but nobody does it consistently. And in fact, being under pressure all of the while is actually more harmful to our performance than not. Again, one of the reasons that we end up putting ourselves under pressure is that goal gradient effect. So actually working to a deadline means that we get lots of things done, but often the quality and the quality of them is not as good as it would be if we were more organised and we weren't doing things in an urgent, reactive, pressured, stress way. We were doing things in a more kind of planned way. So some challenges for our thinking. And so if you're now kind of interested and engaged in these possibilities for you for Monday morning, what are the kind of things that we can do to interrupt the old patterns and to create new habits and thinking? So the first thing I think is to think more clearly about balancing risks and accountability, and I'll say a little bit more about that and about each of these. It's also about putting boundaries and time management to boost performance, and thinking about our emotional intelligence, but also enhancing our emotional resilience. And there's a difference between emotional intelligence and emotional resilience. And I'll go through the difference to those in this next section, and then we're getting towards the end of the presentation. I think one of the things that's very easy for us to do when we're in that pressured, stressed, overwhelmed, distracted place is to just see our accountability to our work, our clients, and our organisation, and lose the other accountabilities that we have. You know, to look after ourselves, to spend time with those that our nearest and dearest and care for ourselves and for others, as well as the commitment that we have to work. Again, I think there are also commitments and accountabilities to our professional bodies, and one of the things that we talk about a bit more on the course is that, you know, one of the ways of dealing with a high pressure, high bombardment environment is to keep an independence of thought and action. Again, you know, this is easy to relate to our requirements for professional judgment, but I also think this is where I challenge people when people say that they're instructed to do things by their organisations, and actually our professional registration and our professional body do provide us with some anchoring to take on those issues and to get into a dialogue about whether or not those things are necessary to be done. So I'm sure we might have some debate about that at the end of this. It's about balancing the risk to ourselves. So, you know, it's not just that if we kind of carry on, we're superheroes. We will wear ourselves out. We will compromise our relationships and our time. We won't be available for our colleagues to support us, and actually we're not going to be as effective for our organisation or for those that we work with and on behalf of. So again, there are some really important challenges to how we think about risk in the environment that we work in. It's not just about the risk in our caseloads or the risk to organisational reputation. There's risk to us that we often ignore to our cost, and certainly I've worked with people who've, you know, had some life-threatening kind of responses to their over-commitment to work. So, and again, I think the other thing that's very difficult for us to think about is that, you know, in the risk environments that we go into in our work, actually we don't control that very much. It's not that often that we go in and take control of situations. We may be using our authority in a high status way, but we're influencing risky situations more than we're taking control of them often. And so again, that has a cost to us in terms of our relational risk taking. And again, we need to notice that that makes this work maybe more tiring than other kinds of work that people do. And again, I think when we're busy, the other thing that we don't do for ourselves and the media don't do on our behalf is really have a conversation which is about what's the work that's successful, what's the work that goes well, and really anchoring ourselves in what we do well and building on that. We tend to just be worried about what's going wrong and what we need to sort out. So again, I think it's always helpful just to kind of talk to yourself about what you have achieved that day and what has gone well. You're doing, taking a breath as it ends so that you can think about what you need to do, moving into the next task to prepare for it, and again, just taking a breath as you start that task. So just slowing it down a bit and keeping your focus and getting rid of the distraction makes you more effective, and it actually allows you to do more by being less distracted. Again, I think it's really important we think about boundaries between work and home, particularly if you're going home and you're taking on caring responsibilities fairly quickly. Remember, you know, organisations that do difficult work that can be traumatising are often uniformed. They often have lockers and changing rooms so that there is a very clear structural difference between the me that comes to work and the I that does the work. So again, what kind of boundaries and routines do you give yourself? Do you give yourself some decompression time? You know, car journeys is often a good way of doing this. Do you have a kind of set of clothes that you just wear for work, or do you make sure that you take your phone out and your bag up and put it away so that you really provide yourself with some clear signals that, you know, work is over and I'm home? And again, I think because, again, so much of our work is relational, it's very easy to get confused between, you know, who's the I that goes to work and who's the me at home, and, you know, to be doing lots of work if we work at home as well regularly, it can feel that the I at work is just taking us over. And again, don't tyrannize yourselves with lists. there's a reference at the end of this called, I think it's called Do Less. And so one of the things I get people to think about is not, starting work with a 50-item to-do list, particularly when we know that we don't necessarily fully control the urgent and important work that's going to come to us on a daily basis. So if you start with a 50-point list and something difficult's happened and you haven't got any of that done, you're going to feel like you've failed. What I encourage people to do is really think about, urgent and important things, and important but not urgent things, and just do them 4 at a time. So it feels more manageable, and if you're taking a break between them, then you can just feel a bit more in control of the busyness. Oops. Next task. So a little bit about emotional intelligence and emotional resilience. So I've just put the Daniel Goleman definition of emotional intelligence: being able to motivate oneself and persist in the face of frustration, controlling impulse and delaying gratification, regulating one's moods and keeping distress from swamping the ability to empathise. Sorry, that's wrong. Bit of a glitch on the PowerPoint there. To empathise and to hope. So again, I think it's really important. First of all, how we look after ourselves, and what we do when we're kind of stressed to kind of come back to an ability to work with frustration and stay motivated. And it's important to think about how we regulate our moods, so exercise, all of those kinds of things. Alcohol, maybe kind of less positive way of dealing with a kind of busy and difficult day. But the other things that are important as well is this notion of positive self-talk and positive psychology. So the other thing that emotional intelligence is linked to is a kind of positive psychology. And again, if you're interested in this, there's quite a lot in the pressure book at the end of the section that's quite easy to read and easy to kind of grasp. But again, I think there's quite a challenge to us in this. One of the things that I also ask people to do is think about their self-talk. What is it that you're saying to yourself about, whether you're good enough, or whether you have to get everything done, or whether you are very self-critical, and just try and interrupt those kinds of thoughts with a kind of kinder self-talk and a more encouraging self-talk, and be available to. It's very hard for us sometimes to take on the positive feedback that people give us. So when people are giving us positive feedback, take that on. And what we're talking about around a kind of positive psychology is, having confidence in your abilities. Yes, you're doing difficult and challenging work that's going to stretch those abilities, but be confident in the ones that you have and be anchored around it. Again, we know that in the work that we do, there are things that don't work out the way that we want, but actually we don't notice the work that we do that actually does work well, and that can be an enormous source of optimism for us. I think tenacity. I think social workers, almost by their nature, are quite tenacious creatures. So tenacity is really important, and being able to kind of keep going through difficult things, and then. Enthusiasm. How do you keep yourself buoyed up, but also how do you feed off one another and keep each other going? And that really takes us into something around emotional resilience. So when I do the work, where we're talking about exposure to trauma and traumatic events, and working in an environment that is potentially traumatizing, as well as risky and uncertain, then I think it's not good enough just to have emotional intelligence. We need emotional resilience, and this is a definition from a book called Managing Trauma in the Workplace, which was edited by two of the people who ran the original CEOPS service. So, resilience is a capacity inherent in individuals, groups, and organisations to maintain the ability to function, grow, and relate and grow in the presence of significant disturbances and challenges. Resilient organisations and individuals are able to manage the demands, challenges or changes brought about by a crisis or disaster, and to emerge with at least an ability to function at their previous level, but at best to have used the experience to achieve an increased level of knowledge, understanding and growth. So again, if we're in a busy, reactive environment all of the while, we're not going to have a chance to kind of process trauma and work with it to a positive outcome. The definition talks about these three areas: the individual, group and organisational approaches. And for me, to be resilient rather than just be emotionally intelligent, we have to have those other aspects of group support and organisational support. So we've talked a lot about the individual decision making and thinking, our routines and preparation. But I think the really important thing for us doing difficult work is the support of peer groups and colleagues at work, teams at work, and also having a network of family and friends that we can talk to about difficult things. This is a really important part of our resilience. And again, one of the things that you might want to kind of reflect on is, if we're just busy with our own caseloads all of the day, every day, then we're not available, A, to offer other people resilience, but also to offer to receive some support ourselves. And what's the impact of flexible working and work styling on that safe anchored place in a team that we can come back to, where people know us very well. If we've had a difficult time, people are just going to pick that up in our presentation and our behaviour, and then we're not going to have to say anything, they're just going to know. So again, what's the level of kind of group and team support that you've got, and how available is that on a very routine basis? And what are the organisation doing? Are they making sure that you've got access to supervision? Are they supportive to you as well as challenging? Do they provide routes to independent support and counselling if things happen? What's the kind of culture of your organisation about doing difficult work? Is it yes, this will have an impact on it, or is it suck it up, this is just what social work's like? So again, it's important to kind of notice the culture that you're in, both in terms of your team and in broader organisational terms. And then, what support do you get from your colleagues in your organisation when things happen or go wrong? What would you notice or think about? Because that is a really crucial part of resilience. And again, when we do the training, we do spend quite a bit of time thinking about this. So that's really most of the content. There's some other stuff on the website if you're interested. The connection to the blog is a short one, so it's 1 minute mindfulness for busy people, which goes through some of these things. There's a bit longer blog that's just gone up as well, which talks about this stuff in a bit more detail. Our training covers a range of other things, so we go into a bit more detail about the ladder of inference, about a window of tolerance, and understanding and recognising response to trauma and how we can kind of respond well to it and recover from it. Those are our kind of contact details, social media ones, and I think I've finally finished. So thank you for listening. I hope there's some food for thought. We do have some time for questions and comments and pushback or reactions. So I'll put it over to you and see what's coming up. Yes, I'll show the links again. I'll do them a bit more slowly. Sorry about that. If you Google LawsOn Thinking, there's a button that will take you to the blogs on there. So while the links are on, and we've put quite a lot of material on our LinkedIn profile. So if you want to read a bit more and read around some of the other stuff that's around on social media, have a look at the LinkedIn page, which is there. Thank you for those positive comments, Michelle and Rachel. Any points or questions or thoughts that you have? Yes, I agree that, Andy, that some of these things are obvious, and I think one of the ways of thinking about resilience is as personal housework. You know, what I like about those frameworks is that they're just very, very straightforward to get your head around, and actually they really help anchor and orient us to what's important. Yes, there should be a way of getting a copy of the presentation. Amanda, I think it's just available at the end. Is that right? Maisie, do you know how to get a presentation?
Amanda, I think Amanda can comment on that. I think.
Yeah, Amanda, can you comment on that? But yes, it's my understanding you can get it. There you go. Thanks, Amanda. Yes, and again, I think it's prioritising reflection. One of the other things that we talk about on the course is that, you know, we tend to see reflection as a very neutral thing. I think when we're busy and under pressure, reflection actually becomes quite a challenging, anxiety-provoking thing. So taking the time to step into reflection and to organise ourselves is actually harder than we think it is. Thanks very much. Just, you know, what I'd invite you to do is just kind of have a go at some of the individual things, and also just to think about your team and your networks of support. Yes, I agree. You know, your team managers as kind of leaders of your teams, you know, are really important about legitimising culture. I've certainly worked in a local authority where we had people on the programme working in a team where the manager was making them go home at 5 o'clock every evening, and a culture in a team where if you didn't stay till 7, it was disapproved of. And certainly it was very challenging for some of our participants in the 7 o'clock culture to take their bags up and go at 5 o'clock. So yes, I think leadership is really, really important. Yeah. Good. Thanks, Nikki. That you're gonna take these thoughts away. Again, stick with it is what I'd say. You know, we do when I do some longer programs with people, I always do the practical resilience stuff on day one, and just ask them when I see them about how they're doing with it. And it's not easy because you know, you don't need me to tell you how busy it is out there. Yes, culture is really, really, really important. And again, quite often there's a kind of microculture which is set by the leadership that we get from our team managers, or, you know, how our experienced workers approach, you know, resilience, and how they kind of support less experienced members of the team. But there's also a kind of bigger organisational culture about what the messages are. And again, I think one of the problems often is the reputational pressures that people feel. So rather than tell people they're doing a good job, we have a dashboard which just tells us, you know, how many bits of our work are out of time. So, and again, I'm not saying that's not important, but I think it's not balanced well enough with the book that we do. Thanks, Steve, for the endorsement of the Eating Frogs book. Again, really, really simple, straightforward to read, simple techniques that you can take on. Yes, again, one of the things that, you know, comes out of Eating Frogs is that you do, you know, there will be occasions when difficult things, you know, go wrong, and the anxiety that you had about them was justified. But actually, you know, most of the time, the anticipatory anxiety just gets in our way. You know, the email stuff, one of the other things that we talk about is sideshows, and there's an awful lot of email traffic, particularly, which just creates sideshows. The other tip I just leave you with, I know we're getting close to the end now, is you know, that kind of punishment that we get from going on holiday. So you go on holiday, you come back, and there's 200 emails waiting for you. I do have coaching clients of mine who, before they go on holiday, say, please don't send me any emails to this address. I will delete them when I come back. If you have urgent things that need attention, please email me. Or email me when I'm back. Nothing disastrous has happened yet. Thanks, Amanda. So I know it's available. So if you want to organise a little kind of team viewing of it, I'm sure that's kind of possible to do. I think I'm not quite sure how the technology works, but you can look at this with Teams. Thank you. Yes, I just think, you know, take the resilience conversation into your teams and organisations, and there are some really, really simple things that help us feel less stressed. And particularly if you are a newly qualified social worker, you've got newly qualified social workers in your team, settling people down around resilience thinking really, really helps them cope, because you know, we all know what it's like when we're just starting this profession. You know, one day you think you can, and the next day you think you can't, and it's quite tricky, isn't it? Thanks, Maria. Yeah, give it a go, Andy. Give it a go to see what happened. Ooh, well, I was quite nervous about that, but I've quite enjoyed doing that. So thanks, everybody. We've got 2 or 3 minutes left, so if there's any other questions or points, I'm quite happy to respond to those. But again, it's Friday afternoon, so hope your Friday afternoons are quiet for you and you have a good weekend. Amanda, I think you'll need to answer the kind of team member watch this later. I'm sure they can, but there's a way of doing that. There you go. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for the feedback. Yes, it just talks about the window of tolerance. If you Google Marie Deselic, what you'll find is, so her work is particularly about working with young people and how you help them work with trauma. And so what we've done is just adapted that for how we think about working with the window of tolerance. So again, if you Google the window of tolerance, Amelia, you'll find helpful stuff about that on there. Okay, people, are we going to the end of questions and getting on? So you know, let me know how you get on. Do have a kind of crack at something on Monday morning and see how it goes, and just stick with it. Again, the feedback that I get is if you kind of stick with it, it really helps. And it's not unusual to have people coming back saying, I'm busier than I was when I started the course, but actually I feel much, much less stressed and actually more able to do more because of these kinds of habits. There we go. Okay, I think that's probably it, everybody. Thanks. Have a good weekend. Bye now.